If you've spent any length of time browsing YouTube, you'd know that the venerable Casio Duro MDV-106 is more than a fan favourite. Often considered the best value quartz diver, its reign has been unopposed since its introduction, providing solid water performance and surprising build quality for typically well under £100, depending on the market you reside in. But recently I stumbled upon an alternative that may have finally surpassed it in bang for the buck. Unsurprisingly, this one is also from Casio, who tend to dominate these lower price brackets. When I first saw an image of the MTP-S110, I instantly thought it looked like a cousin of the Duro, with an identical strap and a comparable case shape. Nevertheless, there were a couple of things that stood out to me, both of which were written right there on the dial. Solar powered and 100 meters of water resistance. I got the impression that this was the effective trade-off you'd be making with this model, sacrificing some of that water resistance for a better movement in return. To be honest, for well under £100 again, this seemed like a trade-off well worth making. So I got Amazon to cover the cost of this for a review. It's affiliate linked in the video description if you want to pick one up. Let's see if my prediction was accurate, or if Casio's pulled the rug from under me again. Thanks A171. Well, my expectations were immediately subverted when the watch arrived in yet another new type of packaging. While no better in quality than the others, as if that matters anyway, this clean design definitely looks more modern. Instantly, I noticed that the watch didn't look as similar to the Duro as I first thought. Sure, the colour scheme was similar, but outside of that and the strap, it felt like a different beast. Let's begin with the dimensions to start out. This one has a 43.5mm diameter, paired with a 50.7mm lug-to-lug, and a surprisingly slim 11mm thickness. While this watch has as much chance of fitting my wrist as I have at winning a hairstyling competition, it still doesn't fit as large as the width suggests. Without a doubt, this is much more like a 41.5 to 42mm watch when on the wrist, and the thin profile certainly helps with that. It's much sleeker than the Duro and isn't quite as hefty, at only 84 grams, so it is more comfortable. The level of finishing is roughly the same as the Duro 2, with a reasonable brushed upper paired with high polished flanks, though the structure is more segmented, forgoing the gradual swooping sections favoured by the MDV-106. Personally, I think the case on the Duro looks better, though this MTP-S110 does have a more symmetrical appearance, should that float your boat. My main gripe here is that the crown is slightly staggered from its guards, possibly reducing their effectiveness. I've seen much worse, but you may still notice it. Like some of the similarly priced Edifice models, this solar piece is more of a dive style watch, as it doesn't have the full 200 meter rating assigned to most regular dive watches. As a result, some associated corners have been cut. This includes the crown, which is push-pull rather than screw down, as well as the bezel, which is frustratingly fixed in place. While most of you will likely never use a rotating bezel for its intended function, it's still annoying as it makes the watch feel lower quality, and we ADHD sufferers can't spend our time ticking off our family by fiddling with them. This is my least favourite part of the watch, and I'm not sure what they were thinking with a weirdly dated typeface used for the numbers on it. While Casio dropped the ball on the bezel, they scored a screamer with the dial. Indeed, this is a classic case of stock image syndrome. Yeah, that's my new diagnosis for when these stock images look like dull, boring garbage, despite the product actually looking much more stimulating in person. To get the elephant in the room out of the room, yeah, the second-hand alignment here is a bit sketchy. Not terrible, but not good either, which is surprisingly quite uncommon with Casio. Nevertheless, the dial here is just glorious for a sub £100 watch. That deep silver sunburst hits you straight away, even in darker lighting conditions, only ever being thwarted by reflections across the mineral crystal. This texture ensures that there's always a gradient of light to dark across the watch, adding to the allure. It looks a bit like that on the titanium watch I reviewed earlier in the year. I also think that the applied markers are better proportioned than those on the Duro, which are a little small for the large dial size in my opinion. Here we have a couple of more unique ones, including a large index at 12 with a red slice in the center, and two that have inward pointing arrow tips. Additionally, this is one of the first instances where I think that skeleton hands elevate the aesthetic rather than destroy it. You'll notice that the holes themselves have an arrow shape that matches the indices at 6 and 9, also forming a neat little double arrow in conjunction with the filled tips further along. They're a little quirky, but not too offensive, so all in all, it's nice to see something fresh. Logos and text are all printed, with most being executed to a highly legible standard, though to the naked eye, the two lines of writing above 6 o'clock don't look quite as clear. Some of this could just be the font choice for that specific area, though I wouldn't be surprised if the macro footage reveals a slightly inferior level of inking. Of course, the boon of this watch is the self-charging solar functionality that's built in. The 5272 module within does not bear the tough solar badge, so it may not perform quite as well as the alternatives with that designation that fall under the Casio umbrella. Nevertheless, 8 months of battery life from a quick 8-minute charge in outdoor sunlight is likely more than enough to accommodate the needs of most people. This effectively means that there's no need to replace the battery for the foreseeable future, which reduces the risk of scratching the case rear or accidentally impeding the seal and generally makes your life easier. At lower charge levels, the second hand starts double stepping to let you know that the power supply needs topping up with some more sunbeams. Unfortunately, I'd have to wait another 7-8 months or so to be able to show you that with B-roll. But it was like that out of the box, so it does work. As for the Duro, luminescence is serviceable, with a green glow that shines brighter on the hands than it does on the markers. From memory, I don't think it's quite as bright as the Duro, though I no longer have that model to hand for a direct comparison. What I've really discovered is that this watch is all about compromises and which ones you're willing to make. If you merge this and the Duro, you'd probably have the ultimate cheap diver. Picture it, the proper bezel and high water resistance properties of the Duro, combined with a slim profile, solar functionality, and the dial of this MTP-S110. Sounds pretty epic to me if they could keep it below £100. As it stands, you get about half of those features with this watch, which is fairly decent for the current price of around £80 at the time of recording. It's a link below. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.